Now, which codes do I use? That really depends on what's on the EOB, because if these codes aren't on the EOB tied to the specific payment, then here's a little rule of thumb that I go by. Up at the top, if there's a difference between the charge and the allowed amount, you'll always use a C code, meaning the contractual obligation code, CO, or the CR for correction reversal. And then if there's a difference between the allowed and the payment, then you're always going to use a PR code for patient responsibility. Now here's a little trick that helps me remember this. It may sound goofy to you, but anyways, you're going to get it. If there's a difference between the allowed amount and the C codes, because the charge begins with the letter C, so I keep in my mind the C codes, the CR or the CO for contractual obligation, then I'm going to use the C codes. If there's a difference between the allowed and the payment code, or the P code, the PR code, then I'm going to use the P or PR code. And so there is a difference, first of all, between the charge and the allowed. And these two fields are going to be tied to the total here, the other total. And these two fields, the difference, the allowed and the payment, is going to be tied to your patient responsibility total after we add the codes, like this. So first of all, there is a difference. I'm going to use a CO code. I'm going to come down in here, and if I know the code, I'll type it in, hit the tab key, or in this case, I'll click on the button. And I can scroll through here until I find a code. And I'm going to use the CO42 code and double click on that, and you can see when you hover over it, it explains it to you that this is the code of charges exceeds our fee schedule or maximum allowable amount. So double click on that, and you can see we exceeded the allowed amount by $100. So I've got the code that tells me that. Now I just have to tell them it was by $100, then hit the tab key. Now the units is usually 0, but you can do halves like 1.5. So in any case, I'm leaving mine to 0, and then just click add. Automatically when I add it, it's tying to the other total. Again, the difference between the charge and the allowed after I add the total amount is going to put it in the other total here. So the $100 ought to equal the difference between those two. If they don't, it's less than 50, then you need another CO code or CR code, so the total amount makes up for the difference between the two. Because if you don't, you click OK like I do now, and it does, but it's telling me I haven't put in a code for the difference between the allowed and the payment. So either way, it's going to catch you. It's going to tell you, look, your PR code isn't working. You don't have the correct one entered. The total does not equal the allowed amount less the payment amount. But it's not capturing me for this because I've got the difference between the charge and the allowed correct. So I'm going to click cancel. And I'm going to finish this up to make sure I've got the difference captured by using a PR code, P code between the allowed and the payment. So click on the ellipsis button again. In fact, if I come up here and type in PR, select code and hit search, it'll filter out everything but the PRs. Oh, and let's say that it was the deductible amount, so I can double click on that. So what I'm saying here is that the difference of the payment that the insurance carrier paid versus the $600, they're not paying the full $600 allowed amount because they're saying, well, maybe the $300 is going to be the patient responsibility because the deductible is not met. So I'll come down here and type in $300. So if Homer Simpson does have a secondary, which he doesn't because it would be listed here if he did, then at least when I submit this on, the secondary is going to get this and they're going to go, oh, well, this looks very clean, and help process faster. They'll say, oh, the deductible wasn't met and this is what we would owe as the secondary. So click add. That's perfect. So the other total is the difference between the charge and the allowed, and the PR total is the difference between the allowed and the payment. If they match exactly, perfect. If they don't, then you want to add more either PR codes for the differences or C codes. And of course you'll know that by looking on your EOB. Now I want to give you a special note here that if you use more than one PR code, only the first PR code will appear on the statements, denial, tracking, and reports. So just keep that in mind. The other thing you want to keep in mind is that if you use your custom codes, is that it won't go out on the secondary electronic claims. So you want to use the default Advanced MD ANSI codes here that they have. When I'm finished, I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Now if I need to make changes, you can always click on it again, of course. Select it, delete it, add more, whatever you need to do. I'm going to click cancel. And then when you hover over it, it gives you the detail or synopsis of those codes there. Okay, then next, still working on the same charge here, we've got the write-off codes that are defaulted from the financial class. If you don't want to use these write-off codes, you want to change them, you can of course always delete them and then click the ellipsis button. And then choose whatever you want here, but I'll just double click to put the code back in here. And then if you don't want to write this off, again, you've got full control here. You can just delete this and hit the tab key. Or again, I'm going to leave it back to $100 because that's my contractual obligation to write this off, and hit the tab so it updates. And of course you have your risk codes and your risk amounts as well. And you can watch the training video on financial class to get a little bit more explanation about your risk amounts there. Before we skip this visit, the last thing we want to cover is the status. You can click on the drop down arrow and you got a bunch of choices to choose from. The first one's the most popular one, the bill next. By default, that one's set up, and all that means is that after we post the payment, if there's any amount left over, go ahead and bill the next entity, meaning it could be either a secondary insurance carrier here that the patient has, or if they don't have secondary insurance, then like this, Homer Simpson doesn't, otherwise it'd be listed up here, then it's going to bill him, the responsible party. You do want to bill the secondaries, of course, before finally you bill the responsible party to make sure we get all the insurance paying out on this. So that's the most popular. Then going on down the list, you have transfer, and that's used to set the responsibility directly to the family, bypassing any other entities. So if he does have a secondary, tertiary carrier, just click transfer, skips them, and goes right to the responsible Homer Simpson here. And then you have rebill. It queues the line item up to be rebilled, so you can rebill this charge here. Denied sends the responsibility for payment to the next responsible entity and lets the patient know that the line item was denied by the insurance and might need some additional information here. And then of course the deductible not met is going to send the responsibility for payment to the next responsible party and lets the patient know that the line item was applied to their deductible. So either it's going to go to the insurance carrier or it's going to go right to him. And so in this case, I can go ahead and, if I wanted to, and say deductible not met, because remember the code that I did use here when you click on it was the deductible amount. So there it is the code. I'll click cancel, and here it is letting also the patient know the deductible was not. And it will go right to the next responsible party, the patient. But finishing off the rest here, crossover needs to be selected when you are posting a payment from a primary carrier that sends the secondary claim in for you. Basically, it's going to tell the system to send the responsibility to the secondary insurance, but lets the system know not to generate a HICFA. And then you have your two holds. The first hold here is you can hold that line item, put it on hold, and it has to be a $0 amount in the payment entry. So you want to make sure it's $0 up here, and it won't send out a statement or a HICFA. It simply puts the hold on the account. And then you have hold allowed, which works the same as the hold status, but should be used to indicate the allowed amount was not paid out on this line item. This will display on the held payment report for follow-up with the insurance company. So deductible not met here. And now this visit number here for this charge for these two rows here, basically it's all tied to this charge, these lines. I can go to the next charge, next visit number, which is the same, but we're looking at a different charge now, and do the same thing. So for this one, I'm going to say it's $400 from the EOB, and then hit the tab key, and then of course click on the gray box to put in the payment reason code. And this will go really fast. First of all, is there a difference between my C and the allowed amount? If there's no difference, I don't need to use a C code. Excellent. Is there a difference between the allowed and the payment amount? Yes, there is. It's by $125, so that's going to be the patient responsibility. So that means I just need one PR code. So I'll come down in here and I can type in PR and hit the tab key. And it pulls all my PR codes. The big emphasis here is that since Homer doesn't have a secondary insurance, that's basically the only reason why I want to use the PR codes or use these payment reason codes at all. I'm just going to go ahead and double click on coinsurance amount here and type in the amount for the sake of the example here if he did have a secondary, and then type in 125 because that's the difference between the allowed and the payment, and click add. And then go ahead and click OK. And there's the second one. And then next is the $50 charge, debit adjustment charge I just posted, and I want to, you can see up at the top I have remaining of 50 because I've already posted the 700 here, so I can type in 50 here. And then the only reason why you want to use the payment reason codes, if you want to keep track of it, pulls to your denial tracking. Also, you can look at your reports to financial totals, your payment reason detail report, if you want to keep track of these as well. Otherwise, the main purpose is to go to out on the secondary e-claims. So when it comes to actually the interest, I don't want that to go out on the secondary. That's just between me and the insurance carrier here. I don't need a code for it. And if everything looks good, I can go ahead and either click OK or OK and stay. Now if I click OK, it's actually going to post the payments and dump me out of the screen. But I want to stay in the screen because I have one more patient and I'm still working on an EOB here. So I'll click OK and stay. You do have a couple of other buttons here, the patient history and the family history. Click on the patient history if I need more details before I post this to look up Homer Simpson's previous financial history of charges and payments posted. Go ahead and click on the button. And it brings up his history just like it would if you were in the patient demographics and you clicked on the history tab down at the bottom. So you can come in here to get, for whatever reason, more detail about his history of payments and charges posted. Close out of that. Next is the family history, is all the family members who are associated with the responsible party tied to Homer Simpson. And if there's anybody here, I could click on it right now. We'll take a look. And you can notice up at the top, Marge Simpson is the one who's responsible for paying on Homer's account, and Homer's the only one that's listed here. If there was Lisa and Bart that are seeing the doctor as well, then they'd be listed down here if Marge was tied to them as well, so we can look at the family all together. So close out, come back, and everything looks good. So I'm going to click OK and stay.